What's up and welcome to another episode of Gizmo Slip Tech. Today we're going to find out how well this Ultrabook, the Razer Blade Stealth with an external GPU solution, competes with a water-cooled gaming desktop. It's going to be freaking epic. Let's get started. Now, I want to give Razer a shout out for sending this Razer Blade Stealth for me to test. This is not a sponsored video in any way. This is my 100% unbiased opinion. The Razer Blade Stealth comes equipped with the quad-core i7-8550U with 16 gigs of RAM and up to 1 terabyte of SSD space. It has an Intel UHD 620 integrated graphics chip, which is fine for general browsing and minor gaming, but if you want to do serious gaming, you'll need to hook it up to the Razer Core. I did a full breakdown video specifically on the Razer Core V2, so if you want to know more, I'll have a link at the end of this video if you want to check it out. My custom gaming desktop is rocking a liquid-cooled i7-7700K with 4 cores clocked at 4.2 gigahertz. It has 32 gigs of RAM and 2 1080 Ti's and SLI, also liquid-cooled. Even though I have 2 1080 Ti's, I'll be running the desktop in single GPU mode so that we can compare the performance of a single 1080 Ti. To start things off, let's take a look at how both of them performed in 3D Mark Firestrike Ultra. Now, 3D Mark Firestrike Ultra does take into account both the CPU and GPU, but it is heavily GPU focused with its combined score. Here you can see the Razer Blade Stealth actually is not far off, and pairing it up with an external monitor helps the Stealth close the gap quite a bit. It's about 11% behind the desktop in raw gaming power, but how does it stack up in actual games? Let's take a look at The Witcher 3 on Ultra settings. Right off the bat, you can see the performance of the Ultrabook being limited by the less powerful CPU. At 3840 by 1080, the desktop crushes the Stealth's performance by almost 43%. That said, you still get smooth gameplay out of both systems, even at the very high resolution and on Ultra settings. PlayerUnknown Battlegrounds is one of my favorite games ever, and I really value having at least 100 frames per second as often as possible, and the performance doesn't disappoint with either setup. The Razer Blade Stealth averaged 98 frames per second, while the desktop capped out at 115. That's only a 15% increase. That said, when you're in cities, the Razer setup can dip into the 60s, while the desktop stayed up in the 80s. Overwatch is another game I've spent many hours playing, and here both setups handle the game fantastically well on Ultra settings. The Razer averaged 135 frames per second, while the desktop managed 220. You can see that the additional headroom of the CPU allows the desktop to really pull ahead. The wildly popular Dota 2 utilizes a heavy mixture of CPU and GPU, and you can see the performance gap really widened due to the desktop processor. That said, again, the performance with either setup would be perfectly acceptable for all but the most hardcore of gamers. Rocket League is an incredibly fun car soccer game, and it's the only game that the Razer setup actually matched performance with the desktop nearly exactly. I don't know the precise reason, but I think it's because Rocket League is primarily bound by the GPU. But hey, that's at least one victory for the Razer setup. So there you have it. The Ultrabook external GPU solution was only able to match performance one time. Overall, considering the form factor and the size and the flexibility that you get with an Ultrabook being so thin and light, being able to just slap in your backpack super easily, I gotta say I was really impressed overall with the Razer Blade Stealth and external GPU solution. This thing with an external 1080 Ti I think is a fantastic solution for someone that needs a decently powered laptop on the go, but doesn't really game on the go. They only game when they get home. Now, there's a lot of pros and cons to having this setup, and I'm gonna go through all of those pros and cons when I do my full breakdown review coming up in a few days. So if you don't wanna miss out on that, be sure to hit the subscribe button, tap that notification bell, and if you enjoyed this, give it a thumbs up. We'll see you next time. Brandon, out.